When many Canadians hear the term sentencing, they think of imprisonment. However, there are several other options available to a judge. Absolute or conditional discharge, suspended sentence and probation, conditional sentence, suspension of a privilege, peace bond, restitution or compensation, community service, deportation, or fines. For a crime that carries a maximum sentence of less than 14 years, an offender may receive one of two possible discharges. An absolute discharge, the offender is released without condition and with no criminal record. Conditional discharge, offender is released with conditions or terms which, if completed, results in no criminal record for the offender. Discharges are usually only granted if it is the offender's first offence and it is not a very serious crime. Although there is no criminal record, it is noted that the offender was granted a discharge. A suspended sentence is a punishment that is not carried out as long as certain conditions are met. This sentence usually involves probation. Probation is a punishment that allows an offender to live in the community, but with certain conditions and supervision, that is, reporting to a probation officer. The main difference between a suspended sentence and an absolute or conditional discharge is that with a suspended sentence, there is record of criminal conviction. If the maximum sentence is less than 2 years, a judge may impose a conditional sentence. This sentence allows the offender to serve their time in the community instead of prison. A judge must be reasonably sure the offender is not a threat to the public. The offender must also keep the peace and be of good behavior. Additional orders may include curfews or abstaining from drugs and alcohol. The suspension of a privilege sentence takes a privilege away from a convicted offender for a specific or indefinite period of time. The most common suspension of a privilege is a driver's license. Another common example is suspending restaurants' liquor licenses. A driver's license is usually surrendered to the court clerk by the driver before he or she leaves the courtroom. Liquor licenses are often removed if an establishment has violated liquor laws and regulations. A peace bond comes in the form of a court order requiring a person to keep the peace for up to 12 months. A peace bond is a common sentence in harassment or assault cases that are not very serious. A common criterion for a peace bond includes staying away from a certain person or place. If the conditions of the peace bond are met successfully, the charges against the accused may be withdrawn. Restitution is also referred to as compensation. This sentence requires the offender to pay back the victim for the harm or loss he or she created. Restitution usually comes in the form of money. A victim may ask the court to consider imposing restitution at the time of sentencing. A judge considers the offender's ability to pay when deciding on the amount of compensation to impose on a sentence. Restitution may also include making the offender work for the victim, although this is not common. Community service orders the offender to perform specific work in the community. A judge can dictate how many hours an offender must work in the community, as well as the nature of the work. The objective of community service orders is to associate the offender with people in the community who are not criminals. This is supposed to decrease the possibility of recidivism. If a non-citizen commits a criminal offense in Canada, it is possible to sentence him or her to be deported, that is, sent back to his or her country of origin. Canadian residents who commit serious crimes in other countries may well be extradited or returned to that country to stand trial. For many summary conviction offenses, an offender may be fined instead of receiving another type of sentence. Fines may also be given for indictable offenses. If offenders cannot afford to pay, they may be enrolled in a fine option program to work in the community to pay off the debt. The most serious criminal sentence an offender can receive is imprisonment. There are various types of prison sentences as well as different types of prisons used to incarcerate offenders. Local detention centers are used if a sentence is 30 days or less. Provincial prison is used if the sentence is between 30 days and 2 years. Federal prison is used for a sentence between 2 years and life in prison. Types of prison sentences include concurrent sentences, a prison sentence for 2 or more offenses to be served at the same time. Consecutive sentences, a prison sentence for 2 or more offenses to be served one after the other. Intermittent sentence, a prison sentence of 90 days or less that is served on weekends or at night. The principle of totality is a rule that looks at all circumstances of a prison sentence to ensure that it is fair. A convicted offender who is considered a very serious risk to the public may be given an indeterminate sentence. This means that he or she will be in prison indefinitely. A dangerous offender displays a brutality that is abnormal, has a pattern of aggression that is unlikely to change, is indifferent to the effects of his or her behavior, possesses sexual impulses that may cause pain or injury to others. An indeterminate sentence can end if authorities decide that the offender is no longer dangerous. In 1976, Parliament abolished capital punishment, also known as the death penalty, from the criminal code. Prior to 1962, a person could be sentenced to death in Canada if they were found guilty of first-degree murder. After 1962, all death sentences were commuted to life imprisonment, which eventually led to the official cancellation of capital punishment in a close vote in 1976. In 2001, the Supreme Court reaffirmed Canada's rejection of the death penalty.